another video here, a continuation. Got some water here. I like to do this. And I've got a little bit of gold and silver in there, precious stone. All right, the fish eagle. So I've studied Schauberger a lot. If you've been following my channel, I'm sure you can see that. So I'm going to give another analogy here just to kind of get this rolling. And the analogy is going to help to further understand this double helical flow motion. Here, the Lemonnier cross section, peripheral. This is a counterclockwise flow. Okay, this is clockwise, right? Clockwise, and this is counterclockwise, right? So Victor Schauberger said that one-way motion has a braking effect, and this is two-way motion. In essence, this is what is referred to as the left hand, right hand rule. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm not really formally. I'm very much self-educated. I'm not formally educated. So, chirality. These two shapes, the two shapes above, cannot be made to coincide. They have different chirality, right-handed and left-handed. This right and left-handedness, like that of right and left-handed screws, is a basic property. One cannot be changed into the other by any manipulation. Okay, so bearing this in mind, and this here, you see, we're looking at, this is an interpretation. This is an interpretation of what might be happening in the double spiral flow, in the whorl pipe. You can look on my channel, the whorl pipes that I've made. So really what I'm doing right now is sitting down and working on understanding the physics and metaphysics of what occurs within an ecotechnological machine. So this right-handedness and left-handedness. So we can't make the right and the left hand overlap, right? But if we think in terms of music, right, we can play music. This can be our bass and our treble. If we think in terms of holding something like a garden tool, right? We're holding a scythe, right? Or we're in a tug of war. So in this scenario, we're not manipulating chirality. This is showing how nature takes her left and her right hand, her masculine and her feminine principle, and they work together. And one of the ways that we can understand this, bearing in mind the cool central Lemonnier flow, the water-bearing peripheral flow, we can imagine now in space, you can go online and look this up, when a bolt, a screw, or a gyroscope is moving through space, what happens? What happens to it as it's moving through space? It's spinning, and then what happens? Does it not do an inversion? Is there not some sort of inversion that takes place? So you can go and look that up. And now what we can do is we can imagine that that type of inversion is taking place within this pipe. And what has cooled and compressed and dematerialized into this super high potency biological vacuum then expands. This is the energy expansion here at the Ford. That's the energy expansion at the Ford and the turning of the top, right? And this is the way that nature, is this how nature, makes her left and her right hand work in tandem to strengthen her tissue, her blood, her water, ennoble her tissue so that her tissue ennobles the banks, right? Because in a condition where water's developmental path is strengthened by a form of natural hygiene. Here, natural hygiene is thought of as these curve combs, these oleodynamic curve combs installed around the banks, which enwind the water. And in essence, through the correct angle, by enwinding water, what we do is we increase the potency of the biological vacuum, so to speak. This question of angle, we can think about it in the old sense from Egypt, now referring to Arthur M. Young and his book, The Geometry of Meaning, where on the first page he states that all meaning is an angle. I don't know where I first encountered this enigmatic statement. I do recall that its origin is said to be from ancient Egypt, and I draw great comfort from this confirmation that there was at one time, perhaps so long ago that it was not even registered by Greek thought, a tradition that reflected the same conclusions I have reached after a lifelong effort of formulating meaning without reverting to the circulatory found, for example, the dictionary definitions. Okay, so here I'm trying to do the same thing, not to refer to dictionary definitions so much in order to explain things. So all meaning is an angle. All meaning is an angle. And Victor Schauberger said, I'll keep the fish eagle here because the fish eagle also relates to what I had just mentioned about the top and the longitudinal vortex stream. And this gets a little bit complicated for me to explain. So just bear with me because I'm learning how to communicate these ideas. So what am I looking for here now? The original article that I read about a month ago on the process of creation. That is from The Water Wizard, where Victor Schauberger mentions that it is the angle. The angle is the most important precondition for the production of water. Okay? For through it, feelings find their expression, such as happens with laughter. Now, nature is feeling. Blood is her tissue, is feeling. We can go back to Arthur M. Young here for a moment. I do apologize for, sort of flipping around like this. I know I could probably do better at explaining these things. So Arthur M. Young talks about this as well, that the universe is feeling, okay? This is something I'm beginning to intrinsically know. Intrinsically know because now really what I'm thinking, the way I'm thinking is like, this is the earth and I'm on the earth. I'm in a relation. This is not a me. This is, I'm always in a we, in a relationship. Okay. This is the simplest way of explaining this, where psychology now has a transverse aspect, right, with respect to humanity, and psychology also has a longitudinal aspect with respect to the earth. And the longitudinal aspect, this is the spiritual connection right here. So it just as a very simple way of explaining this here, my sort of psychology, and this is metaphysics, and this is physics. Does that make sense? And here, this is not about self-centeredness. This is about a centered self. Because here, when the self is centered, okay, when the self is centered, the top spins free and clean, right? And when the top spins free and clean, we resonate with nature. Top spins free, clean, resonance with nature. This longitudinal spiritual connection is fortified, and this is the peak experience, really. To me, I believe now that religion is almost is a very individual experience, and Victor Schauberger helped me to find this among many other people, because also, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I lived through trauma and I've done my work. So Valerie Kopping, she wrote this book, The Intergenerational Trauma Treatment Model. And what I'm going to do in the future is really start to tie things in here. Because part of Valerie's, her thesis is that treatment is not just about treating somebody who's lived through trauma, but it's also about treating the caregivers. Okay, so here, this is me. Say I'm on the earth here, and I've gone through trauma, and my caregiver is not just my parents, my parents. Okay, your parents are the people who sort of rent you, and this is not meant in a derogatory sense. It's just that our original mother we have an original mother and father. We can argue about creators and God, and I revert to Walt Whitman and what he says, argue not concerning God. I would not argue with anybody about my own spiritual connection with nature, nor would I try to make somebody's spiritual connection with nature align with my own. What I'd like to do here is perhaps explain how I found this alignment, and just from my own inner explorations, having been sort of underwater in experience and all this literature. A lot of this literature was well over my head when I first started reading. But I was seeking something here. This idea of cosmic consciousness, it's one of the few books I cannot seem to find right now. The book Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Murray's book. In it, he says, and now it's been a while since I read this, so I may misquote, but the idea here is that consciousness evolves in our lifetime, in a given lifetime. Like, our body is going to evolve, say, in the obvious ways, from youth to adulthood to old age, and whatnot. Consciousness as well, our consciousness grows. And what I believe happens is consciousness can either sort of collapse into a schizophrenic state. This could be thought of as the sort of techno-academic, chaotic, entropic decline. Or what happens is, through gathering all of these ideas and all of these different thoughts, and through different experiences, one cooks and blends cosmology. And in a sense, this is more of an implosive form of thought, which what happens is in perhaps what happens is a greater level of stability because this axis is found, this axis, this connection, this peak experience. So instead of atavizing to schizophrenia, one's consciousness, because it's been so overloaded, this overloaded consciousness, what happens is this the compression of dematerialization, the implosive process within the organism, which elevates a consciousness. Is it an elevation? I don't think it's an elevation. I think it's just a connection, right? So now it's the thinking is not to pick an apple, right? The thinking is everything done is shared, right? So where am I going with all of this? I was talking about a gyroscope in space and how the left hand, how this visualization, we can overlay the visualization of the gyroscope in space using our imaginations. And here, imagination maybe really is this biological vacuum, perhaps. Oh, I just realized the microphone is upside down here. So is imagination the biological vacuum? Is artificial intelligence sort of robbing creativity the same way that, to a degree, organized religion is robbing the individual of their own peak experience, right? And we can look at that book by Maslow, The Peak Experience. And, we can also, again, we can start to, Sheldrake, McKenna, Abraham, Terence McKenna, another consciousness explorer. And we're kind of, in a sense, trying to become part of this invisible landscape here within the whirl pipe, the energy dynamics, to understand what is happening in nature. And something we know about nature from our outside world is that everybody loves a fresh meal, and nature loves a fresh meal. And the story of the fish eagle from Nature as Teacher, the story of the fish eagle really illustrates how nature wants a fresh meal, and also another sort of very interesting and counterintuitive point here. Because when we read the story, The Fish Eagle from Nature as Teacher, page 35, what we learn is Victor Schauberger, he climbed up a tree because he saw this eagle was circling about a lake, and in the lake he saw a school of fish. And what he noticed was something which he considered to be quite puzzling at the time, which was that as the eagle was flying above the lake in circles, what he was doing is mesmerizing the fish. Okay, so the fish are lower down in the water, and they're swimming. And what's happening is because the fish are mesmerized by the eagle above, swimming round and round, they start to concentrate and cone up. Okay, so the fish cone up. We think about like the way clay cones up. And because they cone up, they're going to concentrate, and some fish are going to get pushed up to the surface. And as this is happening, the eagle is simultaneously descending in a concentrating spiral. So what nature does, and the analogy I'm trying to make here is that what nature does is basically nature is constantly eating a fresh meal. And the thing is that her meal is sacrifice. The meal sacrifices. So we can even think about religion and stuff here, that the meal sacrifices, and this is nature's always eating a fresh meal, right? This is part of her principle here in the double spiral flow, that the nourishment, this seminal and germinal, this is mutually reciprocal. Almost like the fish is agreeing to be a meal, and the fish are being mesmerized into the eagle's talons. And what nature is showing us here is nature is showing us that almost the how the predator and prey, how they can work together within machinery. Victor Schauberger saw this, right? How we can utilize that duality to create a superabundance for ourselves. So now thinking of meals and freshness, we can also think in terms of composting. But this is not the composting that we typically do in our gardens where heat is generated and things break down in this sort of warm environment. This is and what has broken down in that environment, typically it smells, right? And it is, it's manure. This is our compost is manure. But here in this world, in this machine, this is the higher octave. The lower octave is the sort of traditional composting. The higher octave is the earthworm sanatorium. So let's see here. I'll flip through here real quick and find the earthworm sanatorium. Like I just flipped right to that. So now we can sort of think from a seasonal point of view of the earthworm sanatorium, right? And this cold composting method, what we learn here is that the end product of this type of cold composting method from Fertile Earth, page 171, this egg-shaped compost heap built around a fruit-bearing tree. And I can get into this, maybe I'll get into this later because I don't want to lose my point too much. I'm trying to explain cold composting here. An environment is fostered which draws worms. Okay, so this is sort of functionalistically similar to the fish eagle, where the worms, the fish, they're drawn into this environment, this layering of food scraps, rocks, sands. You have vegetable and leaf matter, mixed earth, fine sand, river gravel. And what you do is you create this environment that in nature infuses this egg here, which gets covered with leaves in the fall. The egg gets covered with leaves. You have paper between this form and the trunk. So what happens is there's an air channel here and you protect the bark. So what you do is you wrap the bark almost like a paper mache of the bark. And what happens here, the worms are going to migrate in throughout the season. And then in the winter, the worms are going to, through the cold composting, they're going to liquefy. And you're going to get a high-grade worm casting with this ethereal liquefaction, this ethereal fertilizer. And the ethereal fertilizer, now we can think biodynamically in a machine, that what's happening here is we are cold composting, let's say microzyma from tertiary period chalk, okay, is being cold composted to higher grade matter. So in this eating of a meal, what happens is that, so typically what is said is that what comes out doesn't look as good as what goes in, right? What we eat doesn't, and what we shit, the two are not the same, obviously. Now this, in essence, what we're talking about here is the tree of life. And here in the tree of life, the meals are always fresh and the entrails are better than what started. This is the ennoblement. This is the idea of ennoblement. Okay, does that make sense? Does that kind of explain ennoblement? The biological vacuum is no vacuum. It is a super high potency, high vibratory, quasi-material, compression of dematerialization. Is the biological vacuum what we call imagination? Is this why Einstein said imagination is far greater than knowledge? Is it me? Or, it's funny because they say the royal we. And which one is narcissistic, actually? Which one is narcissistic? Is it narcissistic to say we because you acknowledge that you're grounded in a living ova, Mother Earth? And here, this is, we think about, I really like when the light, because this is called a mind light, right? This light has a random event generator in it. So the light is supposed to randomly change colors. But if we look into what Princeton experiments and anomaly research say, we find consciousness, there is a relationship here between light and me, right? And this is literally what I'm saying here. So, we can argue about the shape of the earth. Is the earth flat? Is it round? Is it the shape of a tortoise? But, this sociologically, we can sort of say, like, this is like arguing about the shape of women, right? And this is all sort of a personal preference thing. I mean, they say it's not over till the fat lady sings. Fat lady is Mother Earth. Mother Earth, she's the frog. She's the frog princess we're supposed to kiss, right? That's the story there. And what happens when we do that collectively is, well, the world that is possible is, it literally is the inversion. It's the tree of life. This is the tree of life here. The overabundance, the superabundance. In the last video, I talked about E equals mc squared and how mass is moved. If mass is moved in this natural-esque fashion, then the resistance to motion decreases by the square of the velocity, and we can cold compost cook to the speed of light. That's a natural-esque movement of mass. And here, now, we're not really thinking about energy because there's so much energy that E is really a question of experiences and expression. We don't have to really think mathematical. As Schallberger said, we need a science of forms, not formula. We have all the formula. All the formulas are here. We can look at Arthur M. Young again and his geometry of meaning. And we can break things down. We already have all the formulas. And we can, very interestingly here, so all of these formulas, control, action, momentum, position, work, force, chain, velocity, power, mass control, acceleration, moment and inertia, and moment. All of these mathematical equations also have like a poetic significance, right? So action is impulse, momentum is transformation, position is observation, work is fact, force is being, velocity is change, power is knowledge, mass control is establishment, acceleration is a spontaneous act, moment of inertia is faith, moment is significance, control is control. And the beauty about Arthur M. Young is not only was he a mainstream educated scientist and physicist, but he also believed that the universe is, you could say, incommensurate. Everything is tying together. And astrology also shows us this tying together of things. So thinking now of all the equations here, we have all those equations, and then we can also think, okay, we can relate all those equations to the energies, because each equation relates to energy, action, impulse, momentum, transformation. Okay, control, this is a Capricorn. Now we can relate this to the zodiac. Control, this is a Capricorn. Here, let me get that particular chart so I don't mess this up. So you have control as Capricorn, action impulse is a Sagittarius. What's the sign there? Sagittarius with the arrow. Yeah. So we can make these sort of functionalistic ties. And part of the reason I'm showing this here, all of these formulas, is for a very specific reason. Because here, in this natural balanced flow motion, what happens is we can start to think about qualitative ennoblement as increasing degrees of control. Because here, there is a form of organization and fluidity, which this control to action, to transformation, to work, to change, to spontaneous act, to moment and inertia, to moment, to control again. When this cycle is qualitatively ennobling, when we're in essence bettering ourselves, when we are bettering and strengthening and nourishing the tissue, the blood of Earth by moving her naturalesque in the cycloid spiral space curve motion, with the clockwise and counterclockwise counter movements. This is the form generating motion and the motion generating form, which gives rise to a resistance to motion, which decreases by the square of the velocity, because here the vacuum sucks the media away from the pipe walls and creates a plasma within the machine. And here now you have this, almost you don't need all the math, because all the math is being done in this cycle, right? All the math is being done in this cycle. And also all of these energy expressions are also, because this is almost how the whole universe works. It's almost how the whole universe works. As Arthur M. Young says here, the universe has feelings. The universe feels. Physicists call them forces. To deny their existence in favor of objective formulations is pure sophistry. So we can think about the control of Capricorn, the impulse and action of the Sagittarius, right? We can think about the work and the factual-based Virgos. We can think about the faith-based moment and inertia of the Piscean, and all of these things. And you may say, why the hell am I talking about this? Why am I talking about this? Because this really does have to do with the tree of life and the generative principle in nature, and the tree which we don't see, but which people like Victor Schauberger, right, in all of his literature, he shows here, this is the growing of the tree of life within a machine. This is the gaining the control of this Rosetta Stone of physical qualities, which correlate with their equivalent English meanings here. The Rosetta Stone. This is like the Rosetta Stone, but this is like a skier who every day he goes back out on the hill and he's better and better and better. And the bettering is the free energy, because the tissue moving within the machine is being strengthened. Its viscosity, its working power is improving. Is ennobling, right? So let's see here, 34 minutes. I've rambled quite a bit. I probably went on some seemingly senseless tangents, because here, what is overlooked in this reasoning is that the universe also includes a non-objective factor. The proton attracts the electron, the nuclear force binds the atom, the planets move in closed orbits, the universe has feelings. The proton attracts the electron, the nuclear force binds them. Here we're really, like, I'm not going to use the word fission, because I really do now see this as a growing of the tree of life. And the tree of life is metaphysical. The tree of life is metaphysical. The fruits are not picked. The fruits are grown. The fruits are grown here. Here the meals are always fresh. They're living meals. Living meals. Always fresh. Where to go from here? I could probably go a lot of different places because here there's just so much to delve into. Think about this here and the top, the spinning of a top or a gyroscope in space and how it does that flip. Funny thing is I can't find the top now. I need a bigger table here, and I probably need a better setup. It would probably be nice to have the camera above, and then I still would like to keep with the books and the more sort of analog nature of things, the tactile nature. Things here like skiing, from a physical point of view, they teach us metaphysics. It doesn't have to be skiing. It can be really anything. But here what we learn is how a child develops into a very high level, super efficient, extraordinarily efficient skier. And what we're talking about with this technology and this way of moving Earth's blood is this is a question not of free energy, it's a question of efficiency, because Victor Schauberger says here, these machines maybe is 96% efficient and 4% losses. Versus nowadays, what do we have? Let's say we have 20% efficiency, right? 80% noise, pollution, radiation, and all these nightmares, just nightmares. So here, this is the tree of life. This is growing the tree of life. Here, this is picking the apple, right? It's picking the apple, and the reason it's picking the apple is because the only force, the only feeling from nature you're using, if we're thinking about nature has feelings, and she has a sort of a suctional feeling, she's a suck and she's a pusher. She sucks and she pushes, she forces. And all we do is use the forcing and not the sucking. All right, I'm starting to get hungry, so I think I'm gonna end this here. I would like to continue, maybe I will a little bit later, but I'll just post this one up. Keep in mind the fish eagle here, the fish eagle. Also, I recognize I do this thing where I say I'm gonna stop and then I don't. The fish eagle, like this is the eagle circling, right? And as the eagle is circling, the fish are being mesmerized. Here's the water level. The fish are being mesmerized up, 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 up. So here you have the spatial distribution of the fish down here versus here. Think about how they're being forced up. This is like being coned up on a pottery wheel. And the eagle, the prey and the prayer. This is the prayer here, right? The prayer. And what happens here? The living meal. That's the living meal. And this, I'm speaking metaphysically. This is from in the tree of life. This is what happens. The eagle and the fish, this isn't a communion. This is a mutual reciprocity here. This is the nature serving up a dish. Okay? So I'm going to end this one here. That will be the final time I say end this one here. And anyone who's made it this far, I do appreciate you listening. And, if anybody would like to comment and add their thoughts, that would be nice. So a little bit of engagement. I might make another one a little later because I think it's potentially what is happening is I'm going into this space now, and you know, I'm coming out of this biological vacuum. Let's say we all have a biological vacuum, this super high potency space within us. We all have this plasmoidic, the shrinkage of a protoplasm away from the cell walls that occurs as the result of excess water loss in plant cells. The implications here in Victor Schauberger's use of it is that it refers to a form of motion that withdraws or elongates and the moved media, earth, air, or water, from contact with the conducting wall surfaces. This reduces all resistance, friction, and heat-producing processes to a minimum. In addition, it also withdraws the media into itself, thus concentrating its molecules into an increasingly smaller volume. Okay, so this is what we're talking about with the fish, right? Concentrating into an increasingly smaller volume. And one can think that the eagle is consciousness. And really, maybe this is also what's happening within consciousness. The internalizing process also extends to the withdrawal of the energies themselves from the wall, as it were, of the confining molecules, leading to their implosion. So not only does the media, the water, withdraw from the pipe wall, but within the water, the media also, these media withdraw from their own cell walls. The end result is the biological vacuum and the phenomenon that Victor Schauberger referred to as the compression of dematerialization. I believe that this is peak experience, this compression of dematerialization. Instead of being void, as in the usual sense of the word, the biological vacuum is actually a superordinate state of extraordinarily high potency. Okay, now I could go on a real big tangent on this one about potency, and I'll just say a couple things here and then I will end it. Potency, the brain, beavers, the universe, sexuality, ideas, organisms, orgasms, procreation, evolution. Oh my God, sometimes I do have to really ground myself in something practical. Okay, thanks for listening, guys.